Hey there everyone, Lone Wolf 360 here, back again for another video. Sorry that this thing took a month for it to come out, but you know how life can be sometimes. One moment you're working on something, and then the next moment you're bedridden for a week, which extends a video that was supposed to come out at a certain time, and ends up pushing that to a whole month after. So, as I said, I'm sorry for the inconvenience. But then at the same time, I did want to take my time with this video instead of rushing it, so once again, thanks for sticking by with me, and how about I get into the video? So, Marvel Animation. You know, a lot of people like to talk about their live action stuff when it comes to how much they fell off, but at the same time, I feel like no one talks about how much their animated set of media fell off. Because, well, sure, you could say that all their projects weren't quote-unquote perfect by any means. At the same time, I feel like there's no denying that they undeniably all had this one little thing called sauce. Rather if it was Earth's Mightiest Heroes, Spectacular Spider-Man, or even a personal favorite of mine being Iron Man Armored Adventures, along with a few other ones which I unfortunately didn't get the chance of watching. It definitely feels like we went from an era of animation and time in media where it felt like Marvel had the sauce, to it feeling like as the MCU grew and grew more in power or more in influence, that the animated side of media felt like it took more and more of a fall off. And so much to the point where there was really nothing of note to really talk about until Spider-Verse came out and flipped the entire industry on its head. And even then, it kind of felt like Marvel really didn't have a way to follow up on that, considering the fact that that was more Sony's things rather than Marvel's whole little shabam bam. But then at the same time, what if I was going to tell you that there was one show which felt like a follow-up to Spider-Verse in terms of quality, one which felt like it actually tried pushing forward its narrative and using its medium to its absolute advantage, one which was, Faye, why the fuck is What If here? We're not talking about this garbage, we're actually trying to type out something good here. Get back into the point. What if I was going to tell you that there was a show on Disney Plus or on Disney Channel, which give or take, which actually felt like it pushed its medium to its advantage, and that one show being called Moongirl and Devil Dinosaur. And I know what I just said sounds like a crazy-ass statement given about how people put the Spider-Verse films on a bit of a pedestal, given about how great they are. And trust me, I get it, you know, it's a crazy-ass statement, but hear me out here. But if there's anyone which I was gonna put my disbeliefs aside for, it had to be Flying Burke Productions. Because if there's anything to say going off their previous track record with shows like Rise of the TMNT and Glitch Text and even the Lego Monkey Kid show, it has to be the fact that when these people cook, they fucking cook. Like, sure, this show may be a bit goofy given its premise. Like, obviously, look at the giant dinosaur and say that show wasn't gonna be goofy. But at the same time, when this show decides to go pop off, it just fucking pops off, and there's just so much to love about it that it's just kind of hard to describe it in a concise way. Rather it be the characters, the animation, or even the music, which I gotta say, please put some tracks as a certified playlist. This show just all around feels like it has so much love and care put into it, and I do feel like there's a lot to admire starting off with the characters. In which I gotta say, Lunella was a surprisingly fun protagonist. Sure, she does come off as a walking, talking nerd emoji when the show first starts, but at the same time, watching her progress as the show continues was pretty neat to say to the very least. Especially when you see about how many times this kid gets traumatized or just fucking humbled throughout the show, which only builds upon her character, along with her supporting cast as well, which I have to say was pretty nice as well, despite them not really getting a bunch of spotlight. Like, Casey bounces off of her pretty well, Devil just kind of exists despite him being the main focus as well, or secondary protagonist, and her family, well sure, they don't get as much spotlight as they really do depending on the episode. At the same time, they're pretty good. And then there's also the villains, which is kind of a weird case scenario, because on one hand, a lot of them do have a lot of cool designs and do have their individual moments to stand out in their own episodes, but then at the same time, once they make that one debut in that episode, they never really appear again, except for one person in particular, which I just gotta talk about in detail. Now, when it comes to Beyonder in this show, I'm not gonna lie. I had no previous knowledge about this dude going into this thing, and for all I know, similar to Moongirl, they could have just both been original characters for all I knew, because hey, no knowledge of them previously speaking. However, I have to say, upon watching this show, this guy honestly became not only one of my favorite villains, but just one of my favorite characters that just became a recurring person in the show in general. Because, you know, after the whole catchy intro thing, where he introduces himself trying to say that he's just observing humanity as a omnipotent being, he decides to go put Lunella up to a really peculiar task of trying to see if someone could just be the perfect representation as to why humanity should just still exist within the grand universe of it all. And when Lunella fails at this, he decides to go like, okay, I'm just going to Alt F4 all of reality. And while in most episodes this would, be a mixtape segment and Lunella would beat him, this just turns into the most one-sided fight within the entire show thus far. And Lunella just is traumatized from the whole thing about realizing that everyone and everything she knows is just fucking gone. Just like gone, donezo, for like a good solid seconds, only for it to all be snapped back to normal as he just then becomes the show's narrator and info dump guy. You know how fucked up yet funny that is? Because like the show actually keeps consistency with the fact that, well, he becomes the show's info dump guy in like later episodes following this. And mind you, this isn't the only time he messes with reality as a whole, because later in the season when Lunella is at, I don't know, some type of, I forget the place, but when Lunella's at some type of park or carnival or something, she's going through this thing where she remembers this kind of traumatic incident and mentions it earlier in the episode, and Beyonder comes to go and visit her. And when she's trying to, dodge the question about what she's so afraid about, he just decides to go back in the editor ever so casually, rewind what she was so scared about as a kid, and make what would normally just be a kid's imagination exaggerated because she got lost at this carnival, to just making it a real thing. Yeah. And then he just, once again, just says, okay, I guess you learned your lesson, good job, kiddo, and just disappears for the rest of the season as well until season 2 comes around. So, once again, really funny, yet fucked up villain. Though I have to say, he does make some progression as like a somewhat better character in season 2 when it comes to him and Lunella's relationship. Though, now that I'm done talking about the characters, I think it's fair that I now talk about the art part about the show once again. Now, if I was going to touch back on the art part about this show again, I just gotta say, for one thing, the animation is pretty much one of its strong points, because there's never a time where this show feels dull. Rather if it's one of the more chill moments, or rather if it's during one of the mixtape segments, which are arguably one of the best highlights during it, where Lunella whips out her mixtape and a certain segment goes. Rather if it be a certain fight scene, or just something else which is relevant to the plot, doesn't necessarily matter, because I do really feel like they do a good job about executing what they're doing. And then there's most importantly the fact that despite this being a show that takes place within the Marvel universe, it doesn't shoddily connect itself to the MCU, and let me explain. Now, I'm not one of those weird people that needs to make a 6-hour video trying to talk about why the MCU fell off or whatever. I have better ways to waste my time. However, I do feel like the impact can be felt when a certain show that recently came out feels like it's nothing more than corporate pandering or a product of brand synergy, versus a show which keeps a brand synergy to a minimum by referencing characters or certain locations while still having its own feet to stand on. And I do feel like that's one of this show's other highlights as well, because, well, I do feel like this show's story actually takes advantage of the fact that it's within the Marvel universe, but actually has its own 2 legs to stand on, as opposed to something else which just doesn't really feel that way. Which of course, unfortunately, leads me to the ending of this video regarding Disney. Now, unfortunately, despite my praises for the show, Moongirl is under the threat of suffering a similar fate to Flying Bark's other projects, in the sense that it's in the threat of getting cut short by its network before it gets to finish off things in the last season or the future season, which in this case is season 3. And if I was going to provide a bit of context, to make a long story short, Moongirl's production, or not the production, but distribution of the show has been kind of odd, because on one hand, the first episode premiered on Disney Channel, and then the rest of the show just kind of dropped on Disney Plus, and then for season 2, they were just like, well, let's just drop half of the second season there at a certain point with 14 episodes, and then just drop the rest of the show at a later date by just pulling a Netflix. And now, according to the showrunners, if the show doesn't get enough people watching its second season, well, hopes of the show ending things off in season 3 are at an all-time low. And I really feel like it's an unfortunate scenario because the same thing happened to Rise of the TMNT and Glitch decks as well. And I really feel like you could tell that similar to those shows that there was a lot of love and effort put into this thing, and that the writers to the very minimum should be able to end the story on their own terms rather than some executive telling them that they can't because of some dumb corporate reason. But I'm just a YouTuber at the end of the day, so all the most I can say is trying to support the show the best you can if you do have a Disney Plus account or just pipe. But I'm Lowell360. I hope you guys all enjoyed the video. I hope to see y'all in another video. Sorry for the long hiatus, and well, later folks.